This is about a role-playing game. A role-playing game called The Burning Wheel. And this is a game that I am crazy excited about. If someone put a gun to my head and said to me, what is your favorite role-playing game? You have to pick. You can't say Dungeon World. You gotta pick a role-playing game. If all of the other role-playing games in the world vanished from the earth, what game would you want to keep? You can pick one. You can save one from destruction. This is that game. This is The Burning Wheel. So what I want to do today is talk to you about why I like The Burning Wheel, why I think it's a good game design from a player perspective, a good game design from the perspective of a designer, right? I'm going to give you some design insight into why this is a good game. And we're going to talk a little bit about why I chose to play it for our upcoming Roll20 Presents campaign. So let's have a look at The Burning Wheel, shall we? So what is The Burning Wheel? Straight from the back of the game, this is Luke Crane's ad copy from the back of the game. Burning Wheel is an award-winning fantasy role-playing game in which players take on the roles of vibrant, dynamic characters whose very beliefs propel the story forward. So the stuff that matters to me here is dynamic characters and beliefs propel the story, right? Like, that's the stuff that matters to me, and that's why I emphasize it here. Those two things are what make this game so good. So this is about dynamic characters, right? Luke tells us the game is about dynamic characters. Characters change in Burning Wheel. They begin one way, and as we see them move through play, they become something different. And this isn't about like, oh, they're becoming different over time, right? A month has passed, 6 months has passed, a year has passed, whatever. This is about active stuff happening in play that modifies the characters, right? Every moment at the table is about changing these characters. So like Dr. Grigori, like, okay, sure, Dr. Grigori in Westmarch is my character there. He's a cleric, and we know he's some weird stuff and whatever, but really nothing about the mechanics tell me how Dr. Grigori changes except that he gets more powerful as he levels up. Right? We know my attack bonus, we know my hit points, all of that stuff, but we don't have character change in a real meaningful way. My character's not dynamic except in a very specific environment. So Burning Wheel is about character change. It's also about characters whose beliefs move the story forward. And it's not just, my character believes this thing, so I'm going to role play that way. And role-playing doesn't have mechanisms. It's about beliefs being mechanically propellant in the fiction of the game. So your character believes things. You believe that the king is a bad person who needs to be taken down a notch. You believe that dragons are a plague upon this land and need to be killed. You believe that, God damn it, you're the rightful king and your stupid brothers never deserve to be king in the first place, and you will do anything you can to seize that throne. Right? These are the things that the characters believe. And Burning Wheel mechanizes those beliefs and uses them to drive play. It's not just bullshit your character thinks about. It's not just background stuff. It's not like, yeah, Dr. Grigori has these ideas, but the game doesn't give a shit about what Dr. Grigori wants. Right? It's about real moment-to-moment stuff that says, okay, these are characters who believe in things, and what do they do to pursue those beliefs, right? What do we see them do to get that point across, to move towards those beliefs? And that's what we call play, basically. So, play of the game creates a narrative. Narrative is the ongoing fictional space. And narrative, later, when you look back on it, is story. So that story is propelled by the beliefs of the characters. And that all comes from the players of the game, from the character level. So whenever we talk about game design, we talk about these three questions, and these come to us by way of Jared Sorensen, who's a game designer, incidentally a sort of member of the sort of Burning Wheel family of designers. And Jared's a really smart guy. He came at game design using these 3 questions. So we ask ourselves when we look at a game, what is this game about? Right? So pick your favorite role-playing game. Let's do an experiment in your head. Think about your favorite role-playing game. What's a role-playing game you've played recently and you've enjoyed? What's it about? What is the game about? What do you do in that game? Right? 2, how? How is it about that? In what way is the game about those things? And I'm not talking about the game telling you it's about that. I'm talking about the game specifically saying, with its mechanics, this is what that game is about. So, okay, sure, but what reward structure, and this is our 3rd question, what reward structure exists to encourage player behavior towards that design goal? So if you don't have all these things pointing in the same direction, your game is not very good, fundamentally. And, you know, this is an opinion. I believe in Jared's 3 questions, but I'm not the only game designer in the world, right? So, all right, let's do an experiment before I get to my what is Burning Wheel about. So what's Dungeons and Dragons about, right? Dungeons and Dragons is about killing things and taking their loot, isn't it? Okay, yep, that's what the game's about. Killing things, taking their loot. No, but wait. Earlier editions are about that, but now these editions of Dungeons and Dragons, they're about role-playing and portraying your character and interacting with story. And so how are they about that? Okay, you get combat rules. You get rules for killing things. You get rules for loot tables and dungeons. That's fun. Exploration, loot, killing. What rules do we get for role-playing? What rules do we get for exploring our characters? Inspiration, kind of, in 5th edition. 4th edition, none at all, right? And then what are we rewarded for in the game? Dungeons & Dragons were rewarded for killing monsters or overcoming monsters, primarily through the tools that were given. Sword, spell, whatever. Again, these are not rules for determining if a game is complete or if a game is playable, because lots of finished, playable, fun games are about these things, or about the stuff that they claim to be about, but in different ways. So let's look at Burning Wheel. So this is why I like Burning Wheel. So what's Burning Wheel about? It's about characters driven by their traits, their instincts, and their belief, and who act on those. Right? It's not about characters who are driven by their strength stat. It's not about characters who are driven by the same motivation, right? We're not all trying to do the same thing. And we're driven by those beliefs, those traits, those instincts, and we act on them. We do active shit to get things done based on those things about our character. Now, how is the game about that, right? How is it about believing stuff? How is it about having instincts? How is it about your character's traits? Well, it's about those by making character motivation the core element of gameplay. Why do you fight for the things you fight for? What beliefs are you burning for, right? Everything else in the game, and we'll come to look at that, everything else in the game supports that structure, right? So as I move through talking about the rules and about the game itself, think about this. These rules are all designed to portray characters who are driven by traits, instincts, and beliefs, right? That's what it's about. It's about character-driven roleplay. And how do we reward people for that behavior? They're rewarded for acting along with or in opposition to, when being dramatic, their core elements. Everything comes from their bits, from the beliefs, instincts, and traits. So by playing your belief, by playing your instinct, by playing your trait, by changing your belief dramatically, by ignoring your instinct when it wouldn't be right to do it, when your traits get you in trouble, all of those things reward you mechanically. You're given fuel. So, you know, if you're a longtime viewer of my stuff on ItMeJP, you've seen beliefs, you've seen instincts, you've seen goals. Those come from Torchbearer, which comes from Burning Wheel, which I've transplanted into Mirror Shades to try to drive character-driven play. And honestly, if you look at this stuff, the way that like Mirror Shades is Shadowrun, and it's about doing missions, but that's where we started. And I think that beliefs, instincts, and goals have had some way some hand in moving us towards this more socially focused, this less specific kind of way of being one type of Shadowrunner. So we've hacked that game so it answers different questions. So for Burning Wheel, this is what the game is about, how it's about that, and why you get rewarded for playing the game. So what makes up the Burning Wheel? Mechanisms and systems are the game. If you've heard me talk to anybody about game design, you know that my mantra for design is, if it's not in the rules, it's not in the game. Let's say it together. If it's not in the rules, it's not in the game. Now, if you're a fan of the OSR, if you're playing games like basic D&D in a lot of ways, instead of being, if it's not in the rules, it's not in the game, their design ethos is, if it's not in the rules, make it up yourself. Which is totally valid, totally cool ethos, but not how I prefer to choose games. So what is Burning Wheel about? What is it made up of? It's made up of the core dice mechanics. You know, how do you make tests? How do you get shit done in a role-playing game, right? It's about characters, obviously. It's totally about the characters, right? Like, Burning Wheel, they are the hub around which the wheel rotates. Your characters are more important than anything else in the game. Players' characters, NPCs, that's what matters. The situation exists just so these characters have a place to shine, to exist in. It also has mechanism systems for fantasy bullshit, like glaives and swords and magic missiles and a lot of the usual crap you would expect, but done Burning Wheel style. So, you know, if you want to be king shit wizard, you can be. You can still throw magic missiles around and wield your +5 sword or whatever, but it's going to feel different because it's not about magic missiles and glaives. It's about, why do you wield that glaive? Why do you cast a magic missile? How does it come from your character as a set of beliefs, instincts, and traits, right? It's got a system for rewards, which we'll talk lots about. How do we put that carrot in front of the players to make them play the way that we want them to, right? That's rewards. And it's got specialized systems. Now, these specialized systems are about how to focus on very specific elements of the game in a way that, again, rewards players for mastering the section of the system that matters to their character. So let's talk core mechanics. Let's talk, what is this game about? Because I've been at enough trade shows and booths and conventions and worked enough to know that the first fucking thing that every person on Earth asks when they come up to a role-playing game table and they start perusing the games, they pick up a game and they're like, oh, this is interesting. The first thing they ask is, hey, what kind of system does this use? Is this a D20 kind of game? Is this a dice pool? Do you use D10s in this game? Which I think is a bullshit question to ask, but hey, that's where we start. So the core system in Burning Wheel is you get a shit ton of D6s. Well, I mean, maybe not a shit ton. Maybe you're terrible. Maybe you only get 2 or 3. But you get a bunch of D6s according to your skills or attributes, whatever you're rolling. You roll them against a target that the GM is going to tell you. We call this the obstacle or the ob. And if you get enough successes, you get what you want, right? Easy. So I've got swords 4. I want to kill you. I'm going to pick up my sword. I'm going to stick it in you. I'm going to roll 4 dice for my sword. And if I get enough successes, you're going to be dead, right? Easy, simple, standard RPG stuff. D6 dice pool is the answer to that asinine question that people ask. But let's go into a little more detail. Intent and task. So, intent and task is a philosophical underpinning for the Burning Wheel that helps the players decide what happens when the dice finish rolling on the table, right? So before you roll a die, or number of dice, in Burning Wheel, you answer these questions to the group. You say, what are you trying to accomplish? And how do you intend to accomplish that? And sometimes it's easy, right? Kill man with sword. Use sword skill, roll. If you roll enough, you kill man. Yay, man dead, sword good. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's using your sword skill to do something else. Sometimes it's saying, my intent is to impress the king. And the GM says, well, how are you going to do that? And you say, by killing men with sword. So the GM says, fine. Roll your sword skill. If you roll high enough, you kill the man. because that's part of your task, but your intent comes true. You impress the king, right? And so this is where it's important when you're looking at what is my intent, how do I intend to do it, and even more importantly, when I succeed, what do I get? It's clear in Burning Wheel what you get when you succeed at your roll. So let's look at this. So in Burning Wheel, the GM determines the difficulty you're rolling against. They build up the obstacle. And this is generally based on the skill you're using, how difficult it is, right? It's easier to make a shoe for a horse than it is to make an entire suit of plate mail. So higher obstacle on that blacksmithing test, or that smithing test, right? So the GM does that. That's the GM's job. Now, your job is to determine how many dice you have in the skill or attribute or stat that you're rolling, and determining modification. So you can bandy about for additional dice by way of circumstances. So you can say, I want to build a suit of armor. Now, I would like to build the best suit of armor possible. So because I went on this last quest and I got this magic hammer from the dwarves, I think I deserve an extra die because of fictionally positioning myself to win, right? So now I have this extra die that I can use. Now, you can also modify the number of dice by if you're wounded. The more wounded you are, the less dice you get. If you have particular traits, so I might have armor smith, right? So that might be a trait that can help me when I make armor. I might have a fork that I can apply. Hey, Adam, what's a fork? You can see I use the weird capitals to help indicate. So a fork is what's called a field of related knowledge. So, for example, if I'm killing someone with a sword, I might also get to fork in dice from knife, brawling, streetwise. I might have knightwise if I'm fighting a knight. And each skill that you have, you can fork. You can use as a field of related knowledge. You can fork in to your skill. So, what's cool here is that you're jockeying for specific additional dice. And someone pointed out the last time I was talking about Burning Wheel that this would be a great system for someone who, like Jeff, for example, Mr. Scarian in Swansong, who really likes to ask for more than the current fiction presents. Like, wait a minute. Well, didn't you already say that I had fought these guys before? Or don't I already know how to penetrate this kind of armor? In Swansong, I just have to guess at a number. But if we were playing Burning Wheel, I could give him a die for every skill he had that was appropriate. It's fantastic and a really good parallel. So, forks. You can also have your friends fork for you. So, if, for example, I'm in a sword fight, and it's me and a guard, and I have my friend here, and my friend wants to help me, and they have sword, they can help me with their sword die. And at the table in the real world, you physically pick up one of your dice. You know, you got a handful of blue dice from your pool. I will pick up one of my red dice and I will give it to you and say, here you go. I am helping, right? And then there's a bunch of other bullshit, right? So special circumstances come from all over. Magic, blessings from faith, all kinds of stuff. And when you roll your dice, you're looking at the shade of your skill. So every particular skill that you have to roll will have a shade. It can be black, it can be gray, or it can be white. And Luke describes it this way in that the purer the color, the hotter the color is, the higher your chances of success. And this also indicates whether you're human level, heroic level, or godlike level in terms of your skill. So if I have a B4 sword, I'm pretty good with a sword, but I'm still going to need to fork some skills if I want to succeed most of the time. However, if I am the greatest swordsman in the land, I might have a gray shade sword. And what this means is that when I roll an individual die, each colored die indicates to me, am I rolling 4 or better as a success, 3 or better, or 2 or better? So it's a way to jump tiers while still using the same dice. If you succeed on your roll, you get what you want, as established by the intent. The GM can't screw you. The GM can't be like, well, you succeeded, you killed the guy, but the king's not really impressed. Because we established that part of my intent was that I impressed the king, and I fucking succeeded, GM, so you can't take that away from me. I get my intent, because I succeeded at your obstacle. Failure, however, means you don't get your intended result, but you don't always get it in the same way. So in that case, had I failed, the GM could say, okay, yes, you kill your enemy, but the king is like, meh, not really paying attention. He was looking at his mug at the time, and, well, you'll have to try a different tactic, right? The king doesn't give a shit. The important thing here is you fail forward. The GM includes more complications every time you fail, so that when you roll, nothing happens, never happens. Right? You'll never, ever have the GM say, you fail, nothing. What do you want to do now? And part of the reason for that is let it ride. Now, let it ride means you only ever roll once for anything. Ever. Ever. Like, I want to sneak into the wizard's castle. I'm a mile away from the wizard's castle. If we're playing D&D, the GM can say, okay, fine. You sneak up to the castle wall, roll stealth. Okay, cool. Now you try to get past the guards, roll stealth. Okay, now you want to get in the window, roll stealth. Oh, you want to get upstairs, roll stealth. Oh, you want to sneak up behind the wizard, roll stealth. In Burning Wheel, it's one roll, that's it. You don't get extra chances, you don't get to go back and do it again. It's you establish your intent. I intend to sneak in to get to the wizard's lair with the wizard. I want him to have his back turned to me. Now, sneaking unnoticed to the wall, way lower obstacle. Sneaking all the way up to the wizard, way higher obstacle. So you can break it down into individual sections if you want to. That's your choice, by establishing smaller intents. If something changes, it becomes a different roll. So I want to sneak into the wizard's castle, and it's the middle of the night, and I fucked it up, and I got caught, and the wizard had me arrested, and you know what? Let's try that again. But wait, I have to change something, because it doesn't work at night. I can't do it. I failed. But wait, the wizard's guards are orcs, and they are blinded by sunlight. Let's do it at noon. Let's sneak in at noon. That's a different circumstance. That's a different attempt. So Let It Ride allows you to skip over all that bullshit as a player, and also protects you from the GM being like, roll again, roll again, roll again, roll again. Oh no, you failed. Haha, cool, big boss fight. So let's talk about characters. What is a character in Burning Wheel? So if you tuned in to the stream that I did about Roll20's new Burning Wheel character sheet, some of this will seem familiar to you, some of it might not. I'm going to get very... we're going to be a little more holistic about it. We're not going to talk about the character sheet so much as what makes up a character. So what we're looking at right now, this is your character burning worksheet. Yes, characters are a big deal in this game. So that means you need paperwork to be able to make the character. It seems intense, I know. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Let's all chill for a minute. This is to help you design your character. And the first thing you do when you're designing a character is choose their life paths. Because as I mentioned before in that stream, a character is not just what we see on screen. A character is made up, just like every other person who's ever existed, of the moments that make up their life leading to when we see them on screen, right? Like Omar in The Wire. Omar didn't just spring into existence. Omar grew from childhood. Omar was born somewhere, Omar did things, and eventually he became the badass gangster that we see on screen. So the same thing is true for Burning Wheel. So let's take a look at a life path. Life paths are about this idea that you have context for your character. They give you the skills you're going to choose from mechanically, and they build space for you to use your circles and relationships later. The game uses 4 of them for the most part, but you can do more or less. If you want to be grizzled veterans, you might do 5 or 6. If you want to be young teenage characters, you might do 2 or 3. You have that option. The GM will work with you to do that. So this is what a life path looks like. If you take Bishop as one of your life paths, this is what you get. This is my grainy ass scan of the rulebook. So the Bishop life path takes 8 years. It gives you 45 resource points You can lead from being a bishop into a city life path, an outcast life path, or the noble court. When you take bishop as a life path, you are given access to, but not, you don't immediately get them, the religious history skill, the intimidation skill, ritual, symbology, history, and obscure history. You get 7 points to spend. You get 2 points, and you have to take domineering presence. As a bishop, you also have to take religious history. The first item on any list is a thing you don't have a choice. You have to take those. To be allowed to become a bishop, you have to first be an archpriest, a baron, a viscount, a count, a duke, or a prince, and have the Your Grace trait. So bishop's a big deal. If you're playing 2 life paths, you're not going to be allowed to be a bishop. It takes you 8 years to process being a bishop, and then you can move on to your next thing. So what this is doing is as you work your way through the game, you end up with 4 of these, or 6, or 8, or 5, or whatever, and you'll have a full skill list made up of whatever it was that you did. Knights are going to have different ones, pages, bandits, kings, whatever. Everyone's going to have different skill lists, different traits, and some different requirements. So you have those. That'll help you build your skill list. It'll help you build your trait list. And then you can go on and spend points to make your character. So let's take a look at the character sheet. This is the character sheet. This is the smaller version. I've covered some stuff up because you don't have to worry about it. We're not going to go through it in detail. But you'll notice how the front page of the character sheet puts beliefs, instincts, traits, and relationships right there in the front. That's the immediate first place you look. Because when you're playing Burning Wheel, you want to know at any given moment, what does my character believe? What do I do instinctively? And what are my traits that I have to accomplish that? So how do I get through life? And so, you know, when you're playing D&D or you're playing, in really any role-playing game, sometimes there are those situations where you start to wonder, like, okay, I don't really know what my character would do. And maybe you look at your alignment, and you're like, well, I'm chaotic evil. Maybe I would chaotic evil something here. Yeah, that sounds good. It's not specific, and so beliefs and instincts help you as a player just take off from there. You're like, okay, the king is a horrible person. I need to unseat them. What do I do right now to unseat the king? Well, let's go after his allies. Let's go kidnap the prince, right? It makes you have an option. It gives you a thing to do. So the most important characters, like I was saying, character traits, the things about your character are your beliefs, your instincts, and your traits. Everything else revolves around that. So get your bits ready, everybody, because that's what makes up a Burning Wheel character. Beliefs are a statement paired with an actionable thing, something you can do. So this is an example of a belief, right? My uncle, the king, is a pretender to the crown. I will enlist the aid of the Baron of Plutlandia to unseat him. So right this moment, if I'm not doing that, if I'm not trying to get the aid of the Baron of Plutlandia, I'm not pursuing this belief. But thankfully, I have 3 of them. So I can pursue other beliefs in the same way. So, for example, I might also have a belief that says, you know, the high priest of this kingdom is under the spell of a sorceress, and I will free him. And that might tie into this belief, but it might be unrelated. But what matters is they're tied directly to the situation of play. So if my GM says, all right, you're all members of the same noble family who've been called down by your father's friend, the king, the new king, called down to the capital to help the king get control. The king is having a hard time. And so one of the characters might be the dad in the family, you know, the steadfast father of the family. One might be the tomboy young girl in the family. One might play the bastard son. And so you all have these beliefs, but they're about the situation. They're tied directly to that situation, and they're designed to drive you towards specific action and conflict in play. So you get 3 of these. They change on the regular. They're just something your character believes, something you're going to do about that. Your instincts are things that your character does without thinking about them. The classic example is, whenever I'm startled, I draw a weapon. Now, the idea is that these are if-then statements, never statements, always statements, and they allow you to both bypass that situation where the GM says, well, you didn't say it, so you didn't do it, right? Like, if you have a GM that's like, oh, well, you didn't tell me you were putting your armor on, so your armor class is 10, sucker. That's what these can protect you from, right? You can just have an instinct, whenever I get up in the morning, put on my goddamn armor, right? And then you are never, ever out of your armor when it matters. Unless the GM specifically makes you make a test or takes your armor away, you can't be without it. Because that shit is bullshit in games. Who likes that? Nobody. It's boring. So this game has rules that say, don't do that. It's also a way for you as a player to say, GM, put me in bad positions. Crusher's instinct in Mirror Shades was perfect. Whenever I see magic, run away. Because you get rewarded whenever your character's instinct gets you in trouble. This one, yes, whenever I'm startled, draw a weapon. That is perfect. If you're in a back alley and thieves jump out, boom, sword's in my hand. But if you're in the noble court and you see your rival across the room and your rival shows up out of nowhere and you're like, oh shit, I thought you were across the ocean, your instinct is to take out your sword, which the king would be pissed about. So you can do it anyway. You can be like, ah, shit, I draw my sword. Then the guards will draw your sword. Now you got to explain to yourself and to everybody else in the room, like, whoa, hold on, why did I do that? Now, these have to be written in such a way that they're actionable, but not like, whenever I'm in a fight, win. Like, that is bullshit. In the same way that I'm the best ever is a shitty belief. So these are things that you can protect yourself from, or invite the character, the player like in the GM's characters, to attack you and harass you in this way. And these, you get 3 of them, so they pair up with their beliefs. You get 3 beliefs, 3 instincts, and you have traits. And there are 3 kinds of traits: die traits, call-on traits, and character traits. Die traits give you extra dice in certain circumstances. Call-on traits get you the ability to break ties. And character traits just say something about your character. So these define the specialness of your character. Character traits are about when someone looks at you or when someone gets to know you, they're going to say, oh shit, this is that guy, he is that. Like, any character in the world could be fat or hairy, but if you take the fat trait and the hairy trait, you are the fattest, you are the hairiest, right? That is a thing that gets you in situations that matter. So this is a way to say about your character, positive or negative, these are things that are relevant. Like, bloodthirsty is a trait, angry is a trait, coward is a trait, crippled is a trait, one leg, one eye, photographic memory. They're all things that allow you to say things about your character, and you pay for them, even if they're quote-unquote bad for your character, because you get points for them when they get you in trouble. So your character is fat and hairy, for example, and maybe in the culture you're in, that's a bad idea. That's a thing that you're in a culture of thin and hairless people. So in that circumstance, fat and hairy is going to be a problem for you. But when you go back home to your homeland, where it's a sign of wealth to be fat and have a great beard, then you use it to your advantage. The thing that people have their mind kind of blown is when you have a negative trait, you're paying for it because it's easier to get yourself in trouble. So that's how that goes. Traits, beliefs, instincts, traits. Here's an example of a character. Here's a familiar little goon that we know. TYRION, for example, might have a belief, I am not less than any man, and I'll prove it by showing off how smart I am all the time. So every time TYRION proves how smart he is and someone slaps him in the face or treats him like shit, he's going to get points. If he can somehow prove to someone, I am just as good as you because I am smart, then he's going to get even more points, right? TYRION has an instinct. When there is wine, drink it. He'll never have to go without getting drunk if he wants to, right? The GM will never be able to be like, oh, there was totally wine there, but you didn't drink any, because he has an instinct. However, when he shouldn't be drinking, that's a bad time for this instinct, right? When he's like, oh, I have to go and meet the High Septon, I better get drunk first. He has the traits dwarf, Lannister, smartass, and secretly kind of a nice guy. Those are all traits that he can use to his advantage or against him, depending, right? So he could say, oh, I meet a character, and I'm gonna be like, hey, don't you know me? I'm a Lannister, and that's one of his traits working for him. And then when the character's like, oh, really? Because I'm a bannerman of the Starks, he's gonna be like, oops, shit, that's a bad deal. This is a way to you know, to illustrate how this character might be in Burning Wheel. Obviously, he'd have 2 more beliefs and 2 more instincts. He'd probably have a reputation. He'd probably have some affiliations. TYRION would be a high-level character. He'd have a lot of points sunk into him. So the actual stats, attributes, and skills of your character come second to what's actually, like, important. They exist only to support your bits. These are the dice you're rolling. You have a B6 in swords, not just because you want to fight with a sword, but because you have a belief that drives you to fight. You are ready to kill for what you believe. And you develop these skills, you improve these attributes to support your beliefs, right? So that's what the point of skills, attributes, and stats are for in the game. So your stats in Burning Wheel are as follows. Your mental stats are will and perception. So charisma, wisdom, that stuff's all rolled into will. It's how tough your brain is, how charming you are, how you're je ne sais quoi, right? Perception is everything else. Perception is how sharp you are. It's your book smarts, right? Power is straight up like, I want to tear this guy's arm off. Okay, make a power test. This is like bending bars, lifting gates, and punching the shit out of your enemies. Fort is your constitution, how tough you are, right? This is the inside version of power. This is when someone is trying to poison you. Your fort will help you with that. Agility, hand-eye coordination. Speed is body speed, how fast you can run. Backflips, ducking, jumping, that stuff. So these are your stats in the game. You have some bonus stats that are things like steal. So steal is a bit like in Pendragon. You don't have total control over your characters all the time. Okay, everybody's freaking out about this. Yes, let's go back. Fort is pronounced fort. It's not forte, it's fort. I know. Don't ask me, ask Luke. Just, it's fort. So steal is how badass you are when bad things happen to you. Oh, a ghost shows up, roll steal. Somebody stabs you in the face, roll steal. Rolling steal allows you to keep your shit together and reduce your hesitation. If you fail a steal roll, you poop yourself, or run away, or pass out. You have those options available to you, but you can't do whatever you want. So that's a thing. You have emotional attributes. So these are things like humans get faith, elves get grief, dwarves get greed, orcs get hate. They're optional because they're not included in everyone. And they're a bit out of your control, right? Like, you get triggered, your greed or your grief might get triggered by seeing a beautiful object, or having your brother killed in front of you. Elves get sad, and when an elf gets too sad, when your grief reaches 10, that's when you abandon the world of men. When your greed reaches 10, you pull yourself back into your dwarven fortress and you never leave. You just die alone on your pile of gold. When your hate reaches 10, you are too enraged to live and you flip out. And this stuff is triggered by things that are out of your control, but you can use them to power your emotional magic. So faith allows you to pray to the gods. Greed allows you to obtain the things you're greedy for, that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, you get wises. And wises are what your character knows about the world. These are skills that tell you what you know about things. So like, for example, someone who's really into Call of Duty, they might have really into Counter-Strike. They might have gun-wise at a really high level, but they might have firearms at nothing if they've never shot a gun. I might have sword-wise if I could tell you the difference between a scimitar and a falchion at 100 yards, but I might not have any dice in sword if I wouldn't know how to kill you if someone put a falchion in my hand. So this allows you to ask stuff about the world. You can be like, I'm wizard-wise, so tell me about wizards, GM. Or you can say, I'm wizard-wise. I recognize that those robes are of the cerulean order, and that means this wizard uses water magic. Right? So it allows you to make shit up about the world or interrogate the DM about that. So wises are a special kind of skill. Now, circles is a special attribute that allows you to generate brand new characters based on your life path. This is how I've been porting this to other systems. This is how I think Maurice showed up in Mirror Shades. This is where Randy came from in Swan Song. Circles is a fucking awesome mechanic, and I love it, and I love putting it in every game I can. Sometimes it doesn't go so good, though. So I'm going to tell you a little story. I call this the Han and Lando story. Or, how do circles work? So, the Han and Lando story is an example of a burning wheel PC on a spaceship who's desperate for somebody to help him out. So, Han and Leia and Chewie and them, they're on the Millennium Falcon, and they're looking for somewhere to go, right? And so Han's player says to the GM, I need, like, an old smuggling buddy of mine. I need somebody who's going to help me out in this bad situation. I gotta get away from the Empire. Shit's like getting too real. I gotta get out of here. Where can I go? And the GM's like, okay, you want somebody nearby, someone who's gonna help you, and someone who's also like kind of underhanded, like smuggler buddy. Okay, cool. So go ahead, roll your circles. Han rolls, totally fucks it up. Just completely blows the roll. So he says to the GM, well, do I not find anybody? The GM's like, no way, man. You totally do. His name's Lando Calrissian. Right there, he's in Bespin. So Han's player says, hey, Leia, Lando. Leia's like, Lando system? She's like, no, Lando's not a system. He's a man. But because Han fucked up the roll, Lando turns out to be a very bad deal. He's still Han's friend, and Han manages to turn it around, but Lando made a bad deal. He made a deal with the Emperor, and you find somebody to help you, but it doesn't go quite the way you want. And this is, again, a perfect example of the game not saying no, right? Of saying yes, but it's going to be complicated before the day is through. You can affect your circles rolls by affiliations and reputations. So you can pay at the beginning to be like, I want to be better at finding other bandits or other smugglers. So I'm going to take a high affiliation with a smuggler's order or a reputation for the best smuggler in the system. You can have negative affiliations and reputations. So like a certain group hates you, or you have a reputation for being opposed to a certain group or a bad reputation. That's something that can happen to you. And that can happen through play. Reputations happen and affiliations happen just by playing the game. Resources is a stat that takes all of the moment-to-moment shit about money, like I have 100 gold, and I have 15 silver, and I have 10 GP gems, and just makes them a single roll. So you can say, I have resources too. I want to roll to buy a boat. Okay, cool, it's Ob 4. Well, you better get some help. So it just makes it a stat. Money is a stat in this game. And you can have cash dice if you find a treasure chest full of gold, but it's just a die you can use once to boost a resources roll. So if you fail that roll, you become taxed. It takes money to make money, and so you can lose your resources. Your credit can run out. When you're making your character and you're building up your life paths, you get points that you use to spend to buy spells if you're a wizard. So gifted is a trait you have to be a wizard. You can buy equipment, so swords, horses, armor, food, shoes. You have to buy shoes. Shoes cost 1 point. Don't forget your shoes. And you can buy relationships. And relationships are NPCs that, they're like circles you rolled in your past. They can be characters that you know, characters who are your friends, characters who are your enemies, and they cost a certain amount depending on how important they are. You know, the king or the queen or the prince or the princess, they're going to be like 15 points to begin with. A lower level duke might be 10 points or less. Or somebody who's a nobody, they might just start at 5 points, right? So there's a different amount that you pay, but the idea is you can bring them down by complicating those relationships. So if you have a relationship with the king, cool. Oh, but wait, you're a bandit? That's forbidden. And he's your brother? Okay, that's less expensive. But he hates you? Uh-oh, that's more. So it gets to be less and less expensive. So you can have relationships with people who are really important, but it's going to be expensive unless you make it complicated. So to use an example that I used before, this is an inexpensive relationship, right? Let's say we're Cersei. We want to have a relationship with our brother, Jaime. and Jamie is an important guy. But hey, wait, we're directly related, and we have a forbidden romance. Gross. Bam, points. So this allows you to take complex relationships for less points at character creation by simply just making them difficult to get. And then you can refer to them later. You don't have to make circles rolls to get them. They just exist, and you're allowed to access them anytime that you want. They're just present in the setting. Let's talk about killing. Let's talk about being killed. So this is your hit points. This is the physical tolerances grayscale. Yes, it is complicated. When you get hit in combat, depending on the weapon you use, it will add to your score, usually your power, and it will cause a type of wound. So if I have a sword, I might do, on a normal hit, I might do a B7 wound, right? So a B7 wound falls on my enemy's tolerances grayscale with a certain kind of wound. Now, where it says tolerance, those would be filled in with a type of wound, and that would indicate whether I'm taking a difficult wound, a light wound, a moderate wound, or a mortal wound, right? And different wounds cause different penalties. You really need to see it in action to understand it, but the idea here is that it's very hard to kill a character in Burning Wheel, but it's very easy to maim or mangle them, because every time you take a wound, your character suffers and has to make a steel test. Armor can help you. If you're in full plate armor, you are near invincible in Burning Wheel, unless somebody comes at you with a mace, in which case they will crumple your armor. It makes weapon types very important and very useful. You'll often see warrior-type characters in this game carrying around a mace, a sword, and a spear, just so that when they see an enemy with a certain type of armor, they can poke holes in it. And it's actually a lot easier to do than it is in, say, 2nd edition D&D. Attack spells like Emperor's Hands or Burst of Flame, those spells cause damage in the same way, but instead of rolling your sword skill, you're rolling your sorcery skill. So, does the same jam. It looks more complicated than it is. It's very personalized, so my character might have different tolerances than your character, and that's by design. So we've been talking about how characters change throughout a game of Burning Wheel. We're talking about advancement, momentum, and a thing called Artha. So what the hell is an Artha? Artha is a word in Sanskrit that means something that I don't remember because it's not really important. They're basically character advancement points. So they're points earned by playing to your beliefs, instincts, and traits. There's 3 kinds. There's fate points, persona points, and deeds points. Fate points are okay. They don't give you a big bonus, but you get them easily, right? Pursuing a belief gets you a fate point. Resolving a belief gets you a persona point. Resolving a belief in a huge dramatic set piece moment, that gets you. So like, I'll give you an example. The king is a terrible thing to behold and should be torn from the throne. Right? He's a monster. The king is a monster. We should tear him from the throne. That's an okay belief, but what we need to do is make it so that we can earn fate and persona from it, not just a deeds point. So the king is a bad dude. I will unseat him by undermining his authority in the church. So I can, every day that we play, I can pursue that by undermining him in play, by going to the church and being like, hey, I heard the king talking shit about you, or by making up evidence, or finding evidence, or whatever, doing all of that stuff. Pursuing it will get me fate. When I turn the church against the king, I'll get persona, and when I finally unseat the king and raise to the throne myself, because that was my fucking plan all along, I get a deeds point. In exchange for these points, I can gain bonus dice, avoid being killed, or create what we call an epiphany. And an epiphany, remember way back when we talked about black, gray, or white? If I want to become gray-shade swordsman, I need to spend fate, persona, and deeds points on my sword skill, and once I've spent enough, I ascend to gray-level swordsman. I become a master swordsman above all other humans in the realm. And now I can start taking on serious foes. So that's a real thing. That's a thing that this is the reward structure. You remember in the 3 questions I said, how do we reward players for playing characters who care about beliefs, instincts, and traits? This is how. All other advancements comes from making tests. It's the Skyrim method. If you've played those games, you know how this works. Using your skills on screen, you get better at them. The number of dice you're rolling versus the obstacle tells you what kind of test you need. You need a certain number of tests for each thing. Once you get enough, your skill just goes up automatically. You don't need to pay for it. You don't need to train. However, let's say your friend gets in a sword fight, gets his leg chopped off, and now he needs to spend 6 months recovering from leg chopped off syndrome. You get 6 months to practice your tests. So you can be like, fuck it, that's 6 whole months of off-screen testing. All I have to do is just spend all that time. We montage those 6 months, I check a table, I get that many tests, and guess what? I started with Sword 4, but while you were there trying to recover from getting your leg chopped off, I am a better swordsman. And it doesn't allow you to, people are like, oh, you could spam a skill, but you can't. Because what happens is when you make a test, the GM has to say, what is your intent? And if your intent is, I just want to get better, that's practice. That's not a test. And practice is way, way slower. Moral of the story, bad for whoever it happens to, leg chopped off syndrome might be useful to people who need downtime. So how do you get new traits? Let's say TYRION doesn't want to be secretly a nice guy anymore. Let's say TYRION wants to be outwardly a nice guy, or he wants to change his trait to total dickhead. What you can do is, in play, if you have a trait you never use, you might lose it, right? If you trait you want, play your character like you already have it. So just be a nice guy, right? And at the end of the adventure, everyone votes to grant or remove traits from the character. So if a character has bloodthirsty, for example, and you never show your bloodthirst, at the end of an adventure, everyone might be like, oh, hold on, dude, you're not bloodthirsty at all. And my favorite thing about these traits, the best part about this is every character gets cultural traits at the beginning that are stereotypes about that culture, right? So if we were playing Burning Wheel and we were using the Swan Song characters, Prosper might have cultural traits from Cabral that's like cyborg obsessed, snooty. He might have computer nerd, right? And if you don't use those, you lose it, right? So if he's not acting snooty, he might lose that trait. However, conflicted is a trait he could get, right? Religiously conflicted in particular, right? So this is how players gain additional traits. You don't spend points on them. If you're not a sorcerer and you want to become gifted, go out into the world and find a way to change yourself into a gifted person for sorcery. So what I think is going to be really cool about playing this online, because this is all a lead up to playing this on Roll20, what I think is going to be really great is when we turn this trait vote over to the audience. So everyone who's watching the show, you're going to be able to know so much more about the characters we're playing than we do, right? We only have a limited view. We see our characters from our own eyes in the moment, and we're focused on the mechanics, and we're playing the game. But you're watching the videos, right? You're watching us live, you're watching on YouTube. We're going to let you vote for what the character's new traits are. So as a group, if you all decide that Andrew's character has megalomania, vote for it, and he'll get it. And now he has to play, if he wants rewards, he has to play his character megalomaniacally, right? Which he's probably already doing, but now he's going to get mechanically reinforced for that. So this is the audience participation of this game, right? I'm really excited about how that's going to go. I think people are going to be, I think people are going to like it. So trait votes, pretty cool thing. So here's where the game gets fun. I mean, it's fun already, but that's all the basic stuff. Burning Wheel has a few systems, and I'm going to gloss over them because I don't want to walk you through every single moment, but they have a few special systems for resolving particular stuff, right? They're called scripted battles, scripted engagements. So whenever you're doing something one-on-one usually, or one-on-one with like, or one on a small group, whether it's a duel of wits, you know, with your enemy, the Viscount, or a long-awaited fencing match in front of the whole court, or you're leading your team of Gondorian Rangers over the hill to assault the Orcish Tower, we have scripting mechanisms for that. And they generally only come into play when beliefs are on the table. We do not break these out for every sword fight. We do not use these for every argument. You just roll once and you're done with it. On each pass, so a round is broken into 3 or more actions. And on each action, you pick something you want to do, and you present them at the end. So if we're having an argument, I might pick point, incite, obfuscate. And you might pick point, defend. And we reveal and compare. So in a sword fight, that makes pretty clear sense, right? Attack, defend, riposte, parry. In argument, it's making points, trying to make your enemies angry, that kind of thing. And we reveal them at once and say, oh, well, while you were attacking, I was defending. Then we roll, we move on to the next action. It's very complicated method of rock, paper, scissors. So this is what Duel of Wits looks like. So, for example, in Volley 1, I might choose a point. I'm going to make a point first. And you have to roleplay these out. So if I'm trying to convince the Elven King to come and help the human lands, and you're trying to convince the Elven King to help the Dwarven lands, my point might be, don't forget, King, we helped you when the Orcs invaded your lands. That's my point. On your first volley, you might choose an incite. You might be like, humans, why do you even let humans into your court? Humans don't matter. They're irrelevant. They're a child race. So you're trying to freak me out, and I'm trying to make a point. So we're arguing with each other. We're doing it in character, but we're allowing us to, the game is allowing us to do that mechanically. And so we compare the actions, we make tests, and we move on. And just like, it's looking at a more narrow version of a larger thing, where we could do this in one roll. I could roll Persuade, and you could roll Persuade, and whoever wins, wins. But this is a way to say, okay, there's a belief about this. We need to look at this in greater detail. So those are your options, right? I like the hesitation action. If somebody manages to intimidate you in a duel of wits, you can choose to stand and drool or run screaming from the argument. If you're arguing say I'm arguing with a dwarf, and I'm a fancy courtier, and the dwarf is a berserker, and the dwarf says, if you don't shut up and stop talking to the Elf King, I'm going to cut off your face. I might fail my steel test and just leave. I might just be like, ah, no, dwarves, I'm terrified, and leave the room, right? So we have this for Duel of Wits. We have this for combat. As you can see, much more complex for combat. I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes. You can take a look at it. This is things like strike, block and strike, great strike, charge, lock, draw weapon, push, disarm, throw person. It makes fights so dynamic. It makes dueling really fun. So if you want to play a duelist, you can be either a verbal duelist or a sword duelist, and yeah, it makes for a very fun situation. We also have a system called range and cover. So this is for like I said, like Gondorian Rangers assaulting a tower, that kind of thing. It allows you to use ranged weapons and engage in firefights across distance. So this is like bow fights across a river, that kind of thing. So all of this stuff, all of these things piled up make the game, right? All of those systems, again, you remember before, if it's not in the rules, it's not in the game. And inversely, if it's in the rules, it has to be in the game. It's part of the game. So what does this all look like? I know it looks complicated. I know it looks scary. I know it looks intimidating. But what is it actually like to play? I mean, it's kind of like this. This is what it feels like. The little guy with the wheel, turning it, that's the GM. That's me. I'm just cranking that wheel. And then the person tied to the wheel, that's you. You're the player. You're like, oh no. Oh, it hurts my beliefs. Oh my God. I actually just really like this picture, and people make jokes about how playing Burning Wheel is so hard and painful. It's actually more like this. Much less complicated, right? Right? Like, so I stole this. I stole this from Sean Nittner's blog because Sean knows a lot about Burning Wheel. But this is what Burning Wheel looks like from a game design perspective, right? The whole game can be summed up in this diagram. everything moving from one thing to another thing. You start with your beliefs. You earn Artha by making tests. You make tests to recover. You make tests to earn money. You make tests to advance. Instincts drive tests. Instincts drive practice. Like, it all flows together. And this is like the most, literally the most like important part of this whole presentation from a game design perspective. If you're a game designer, this is the thing to focus on. If you just want to know why I like Burning Wheel, I could nerd on about this particular screen for like another hour, but I'm not going to. This is a thing. So that's Burning Wheel. It's my favorite role-playing game, hands down, no question. And I hope that when we get into doing the live sessions, we start to explore this in real time with actual players, you're going to see how the game works over time. And maybe you understand a little bit more why I love the game so much, right? I think that it's like I've described this before. I think that Burning Wheel is the Swiss watch of role-playing games. You can look at it on the surface, you can watch it being played, you can see the hands tick around, and you can appreciate it for what it is, a beautiful object. But once you take the front off the watch, what really matters is all of those tiny, beautiful gears moving around, clicking together, making this engine go. So there you go. That's the Burning Wheel. Anybody have any questions? If you're watching this live in Twitch chat, I've got, negative an amount of time, but I'll take a few minutes. I'll stick around and answer a few questions if you have any about Burning Wheel. I'll try to do maybe 5 or 6. If you're watching this on YouTube, drop your questions in the comments because I would love to answer them there if I can. So, if you're in the chat, at me, and I'll try to talk about that. So, Kid Kent Game asks, someone asked about gaining and breaking relationships through the course of play. If you roll circles enough times to find the same person, they become a new relationship. There are Roll20 character sheets for this game already available in Roll20. You can go and create a new campaign and start playing Burning Wheel right now. Someone's looking for another example of how to raise your skills. Let's say you have a riding skill, right? Every time you ride your horse in a difficult situation, you're going to be making a test. The test is going to determine the number of dice you roll, and it's going to determine how difficult that roll is. When you make the test, you'll be either getting a routine test, a challenging test, or a difficult test. To get from riding 2 to 3, you need X amount of different types of tests. Once you have enough, you roll over. If you have lots of downtime, you can dedicate your downtime to earning more tests by practice, but it takes a very long time, depending on the skill. How does Burning Wheel handle PvP? Well, it depends. Ultimately, it's just intent and task. I might say to the GM, my intent is to use my sword to lop off my friend's head. They might say, my intent is to run away and not be killed by the sword. I'm going to roll sword, you're going to roll speed. If you beat me, you get away. I can't chase you. That's it. You got away because your intent was to get away. If I win, boop, there goes your head. Probably, though, we're going to duel each other using the dueling system. Harley asks, Harley the Kind asks, could you take how Burning Wheel handles characters really well and incorporate it into D&D? No. Swiss watch. You can't just pull out a gear and put it in another watch. You have to redesign the whole thing. Just play Burning Wheel. If you were wanting to play a warrior looking for a worthy opponent, this is a question concerning me, how would you determine whether combat deserves the duel or just one roll? Beliefs. Do you have a belief about this person you're trying to fight, right? Are they a worthy opponent? Well, so if you just have like, I want to defeat a worthy opponent, it's an okay belief. But the GM should have given you a worthy opponent to fight already, right? Someone in the setting. You can make them up together. Are there often issues of players wanting to do their own bits and not be team players? Yes, but those people are bad at Burning Wheel. Generally, I inquire with players, like, what do you want to make the game about? What is the situation about? You figure that out. Everybody's beliefs are about the situation. You write beliefs about each other, right? So, like, I could say Halfling's character is a worthless rogue, and I will never trust him to guard my money because I'm a greedy dwarf, right? That's a belief about him, and it's an adversarial belief, but he could write a belief about me to say, I need to earn Adam's character's trust because I need to prove myself to him. Or I need to earn his trust so I can jack his gold, his sweet, sweet dwarf gold. Burning Wheel does PvP on the grand scale really well. Dusk VEA asks, how do you introduce people who've only played D&D to Burning Wheel? Very slowly. The game has advice for introducing systems as you go. One thing at a time. I would never in a million years dump the whole system on top of them. Lapis Golem asks, I'm making my own tabletop RPG. Is this a good system to hack, or should I make my own? Please, for the love of God, make your own. Burning Wheel is not good for hacking. Jittery Stiletto asks, does the Hub and Spokes PDF contain enough information to play the game? Yes. You can get started with just the Hub and Spokes. Definitely. So I know that there's a lot of people asking about, here we go. Can you have an infinite belief? Yes. No, this is great. So what we call an infinite belief, we call that a fate farm, or a fate mine. If you make a belief you'll never resolve, you can pursue it for your whole life and never get persona or deeds, but you will get fate every goddamn session. So if I have a belief that's like, God is a piece of shit, I will climb the stairs of heaven and spit in his eye. Okay, good luck. Never gonna happen. But every time I push a priest in the mud, or every time I burn down a church, or every time that I curse out a nun, I'm getting fate, but I'll never spit in the eye of God. Probably. So I hope that helps, right? How exactly does one create a character without the character burner? You don't. All the rules you need to play the game are in the Burning Wheel rulebook, in the Burning Wheel Gold rulebook. It used to be 2 books. It used to be the rules and the burner, but it's not anymore. Now it's just that one rulebook. Is it possible to have a character that goes from poor to noble? Yes. You can move from one set of life paths to another. It just costs you time, basically. Yeah, character progression starts in life paths. You start as the bastard prince and you end up a slave. You could start born a slave and rise to the noble court, depending on how many life paths you have and how long that takes. Belversi666 asked me, what is the biggest challenge I've faced with the system as a player? It requires investment. The players have to want to learn the game. So before I ran this, I asked Austin and Jess and Andrew and Colin, are you willing and able to learn a game that's going to be a little difficult for you to learn? Like, it's not easy mode. Get on it. So when they said, yes, we're willing to learn, I believe them. I have faith. It's going to be slow going, but I think that you're all going to learn it with them, right? And Andrew's there to help me. Andrew knows how that works. A couple of people have asked about Burning Wheel's supplemental games. So Burning Wheel has currently in print no supplements. You just need the main book to play. But out of print, there is several versions of Burning Wheel. There's Burning Empires, which is a sci-fi game. There's The Blossoms Are Falling, which is a samurai game. Mouse Guard is loosely based on Burning Wheel, but not the same, and Torchbearer is Mouse Guard Advanced. And they all use similar systems, so if you're curious about those, go ahead and Google them. Burning Wheel is my favorite, but I also really love Torchbearer, for example. So I think that's probably all the time that I have questions for. I'm going to start up a thread on my Reddit, my subreddit, so reddit.com/r/skinny-ghost, and I would be happy to answer questions about Burning Wheel there. If you're watching this on YouTube, just ask your questions in the comments, and I will answer them there as well. I hope that today you have learned a little bit about Burning Wheel. If you want to copy the slides, the PDF for this, I'll put that up in my Dropbox. I'll link that as well. Obviously, I want you to be able to see this. You can watch the video again whenever you want. I love this game to death. And I am so excited for July when I can show you exactly why in play. We can see some characters get burnt.